The farm occupies 200 acres of rural land, 40 miles from the nearest town, accessed by a gravel road winding through fields and forest. The property includes a farmhouse, several outbuildings, and a large metal barn that dominates the landscape. The owner presents the operation as a working farm producing hay and raising cattle, activities common throughout the rural region where agriculture remains the primary economic activity. Neighbors are few and distant, with properties separated by miles of fields and woodland, creating the isolation that rural residents value for privacy and independence. The farm appears completely normal to anyone passing by or making casual visits. Fields show evidence of seasonal cultivation, cattle graze in pastures, and equipment visible near buildings includes tractors, hay balers, and other agricultural machinery. The owner participates in local farm cooperatives, attends agricultural extension meetings, and maintains friendly relationships with neighboring farmers who view him as a fellow agricultural producer managing his land responsibly. Nothing about the property suggests anything beyond typical farming operations. The large metal barn serves as the centerpiece of the property, a structure measuring 80 feet long and 40 feet wide with high ceilings and roll-up doors at both ends. The owner describes it as his workshop, where he performs equipment maintenance and fabricates metal parts for agricultural machinery. Such workshops are common on farms where operators need to repair equipment quickly without waiting for parts or paying dealer service rates. Neighbors occasionally see welding flashes through windows or hear grinding and cutting sounds, all completely normal for farm equipment maintenance and metal fabrication, supporting agricultural operations. What nobody realizes is that the agricultural workshop serves as cover for sophisticated illegal firearms manufacturing. Behind the facade of farm equipment repair, the barn contains industrial CNC milling machines, precision lathes, and metalworking tools producing firearms components rather than agricultural parts. The manufacturing operation rivals professional machine shops in capability and output, generating thousands of illegal weapon components annually, while the surrounding agricultural activities provide perfect cover explaining noise, power consumption, and the owner's presence at the property. The scheme began 8 years ago when the owner, possessing both agricultural background and machinist training from military service, recognized that rural isolation and agricultural operations would provide ideal cover for illegal manufacturing. He purchased the property specifically for this purpose, establishing legitimate farming operations while secretly building the hidden manufacturing capability. The agricultural activities are real but minimal, maintained primarily to support his cover story, while the illegal manufacturing generates his actual income and occupies most of his time and resources. The barn's interior demonstrates sophisticated planning to conceal illegal operations. The front 30 feet contain actual agricultural equipment, welding stations, and metal stock used for legitimate farm maintenance work. This area is what neighbors or delivery personnel see if they enter the barn. Behind this legitimate workshop area, heavy machinery and shelving units create a visual barrier blocking the view of the rear section where the illegal manufacturing occurs. The concealment isn't obvious walls or doors that might raise questions, but rather strategic equipment placement, creating natural sightline blocks that prevent casual visitors from seeing the restricted manufacturing area. The manufacturing equipment represents substantial investment and professional capability. 5 CNC milling machines occupy the concealed rear section, computer-controlled precision tools capable of producing complex firearms components from metal stock. Manual lathes, drill presses, and specialized metalworking equipment complete the facility, creating comprehensive manufacturing capacity for producing receivers, barrels, frames, and various other components. The equipment investment exceeds $600,000, indicating serious commitment to long-term professional-scale manufacturing operations. Power requirements for the manufacturing operation would normally raise questions, but the agricultural cover provides perfect explanation. The property's electrical service includes high-capacity three-phase power, typically installed for large agricultural operations, requiring substantial electricity for grain dryers, irrigation systems, and other farm equipment. The manufacturing equipment's power consumption blends into what utility companies expect from working farms, avoiding the anomalies that might trigger investigation if similar consumption occurred at residential or light commercial locations. The agricultural setting makes extraordinary power usage completely normal. Production focuses on components that convert legal firearms into prohibited configurations or enable assembly of complete untraceable weapons. The operation produces lower receivers for rifles, frames for handguns, barrels with specifications exceeding legal limits, and high-capacity magazine components. Each item gets machined to professional tolerances using CAD files optimized for the available equipment. The owner personally programs all CNC operations and oversees quality control, maintaining operational security by working alone rather than involving employees who might become security risks. Manufacturing runs primarily during evening and nighttime hours, when neighbors are least likely to notice activity. The agricultural setting means occasional nighttime work isn't suspicious, as farmers often operate equipment during cooler hours or when weather permits. The owner maintains irregular schedules suggesting he's managing various farm activities, while actually dedicating most time to illegal manufacturing. The rural isolation means nobody tracks his exact activities, and the agricultural cover story explains any observed work patterns. Distribution happens through encrypted online platforms and connections with criminal networks that value untraceable components. The owner ships products through commercial carriers using packaging, suggesting agricultural machinery parts or metal fabrication products rather than firearms components. Deliveries leaving the farm appear normal for an operation conducting custom metalwork, with packages addressed to various locations across multiple states, creating distribution patterns that don't concentrate suspiciously in any single region. The system moves hundreds of components monthly, while appearing as routine commercial activity. Revenue from illegal manufacturing far exceeds any income the minimal agricultural operations could generate. The owner grosses over $50,000 monthly from component sales, totaling approximately $600,000 annually in illegal proceeds. The legitimate farming activities generate perhaps $30,000 yearly, barely covering property expenses and maintaining the agricultural facade. The owner reports all income as farming revenue, filing taxes showing a modestly successful agricultural operation while concealing the manufacturing source of most earnings. Financial benefits allow the owner to maintain and improve the property beyond what actual farming income would support. He upgrades buildings, purchases equipment, and makes investments that neighbors attribute to successful farming or outside income from his military pension. The gradual improvements don't raise suspicions because rural properties often show evidence of long-term investment, as owners build equity through patient development. Nobody questions his apparent success because agriculture can be profitable, and his military background suggests possible additional income sources. Federal investigators first noticed the operation during an investigation into a firearms trafficking network operating across 5 states. Agents tracing components recovered from crime scenes discover several shared distinctive machining characteristics, suggesting a common professional manufacturing source. The components demonstrate quality exceeding typical hobbyist work, indicating production using industrial equipment by someone with machining expertise. Investigators focus on identifying operations with CNC capability and metalworking knowledge in regions where traced components originated. The investigation reviews businesses and individuals who purchased industrial metalworking equipment, cross-referencing these against other indicators of potential illegal manufacturing. The farm operation emerges as an unusual candidate because agricultural properties don't typically purchase precision CNC milling machines designed for metal fabrication rather than farm equipment. Database searches reveal the owner purchased over $500,000 in manufacturing equipment over 3 years. Acquisitions completely inconsistent with agricultural operations, even those including custom metalworking capabilities. Additional investigation discovers patterns suggesting hidden operations beyond visible farming. Utility records show power consumption substantially exceeding comparable agricultural operations, particularly during evening and overnight hours when farming activities typically cease. Shipping records reveal the property sends numerous packages to addresses across multiple states, patterns inconsistent with agricultural operations that typically receive supplies rather than shipping finished products. Financial analysis indicates income exceeding what the minimal farming activities should generate, suggesting unreported revenue from undisclosed sources. Surveillance teams deploy to remote observation posts, monitoring the property from forested areas on adjacent land. Over 12 weeks, they document minimal agricultural activity, but observe the owner spending extensive time in the large barn during evenings and nights. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures consistent with industrial equipment, operating in the barn during hours when agricultural work wouldn't normally occur. Delivery trucks arrive periodically with shipments that don't match agricultural supply patterns. The surveillance evidence suggests the barnhouse's operations beyond the agricultural equipment maintenance the owner claims. An undercover operation begins when investigators identify the owner advertising metalworking capabilities on platforms used for illegal firearms component sales. An agent poses as a buyer seeking precision machined parts for custom builds, using coded language common in illegal component markets. The owner responds cautiously through encrypted communications, eventually agreeing to discuss capabilities and specifications. Over several weeks, the agent builds credibility while the owner grows comfortable enough to describe his equipment and manufacturing experience. The first transaction provides the breakthrough investigators need. The owner agrees to produce sample components demonstrating his quality, delivering precisely machined lower receivers that forensic analysis confirms match components recovered from crime scenes in the original trafficking investigation. The manufacturing quality and distinctive tooling marks prove the samples came from the professional machine shop investigators have been attempting to locate. The connection links the rural farm to systematic illegal manufacturing operations. Additional purchases over 10 weeks allow comprehensive documentation of the operation. The agent places orders for various components, each transaction recorded, and each delivered part analyzed to understand manufacturing capabilities. The owner grows confident enough to mention his private shop and hints at the agricultural cover during discussions about production capacity. He explains that his farm location provides privacy and security for manufacturing operations without nosy neighbors or zoning issues. Each statement builds evidence of deliberate concealment and systematic illegal operations. Federal prosecutors coordinate with state and local authorities to plan the raid operation carefully. The rural location and agricultural setting mean the operation must approach without alerting the owner, who might destroy evidence or access weapons that could be present on the property. Tactical teams prepare for possible resistance given the owner's military background and remote location, offering advantages for someone prepared to defend against law enforcement. Legal teams prepare comprehensive warrants covering all buildings on the property, the owner's residence, vehicles, and all electronic devices and records. The operation launches at dawn on a Wednesday, when surveillance confirms the owner is alone on the property. Federal agents and state police establish perimeter security on access roads before tactical teams approach the property from multiple directions. They encounter no resistance, securing the owner at the farmhouse before he realizes federal agents are on the property. Agents immediately search for weapons that might be accessible, ensuring scene safety before conducting comprehensive evidence collection. The barn search reveals the full scope of the illegal manufacturing operation. Agents document the legitimate agricultural workshop area in front, then discover the concealed manufacturing section behind equipment barriers. They find 5 CNC machines, several with components still loaded from recent production runs. Workbenches hold hundreds of finished parts awaiting shipment. Computer systems contain design files for dozens of illegal weapon components and production records documenting years of manufacturing. The professional scale and capability of the hidden shop confirms everything investigators suspected. Evidence seized from the barn provides overwhelming documentation of systematic illegal manufacturing over 8 years. Agents recover over 1,500 finished components ready for distribution. Manufacturing records showing production of approximately 7,000 components total. Communications with buyers discussing illegal applications, and financial records documenting millions in unreported income. Tools, materials, and partially completed work demonstrate ongoing active operations rather than historical activity. The evidence fills multiple vehicles, requiring specialized handling for the manufacturing equipment and careful documentation of all components. Simultaneous searches of the farmhouse and other buildings yield additional evidence, including encrypted communications with component buyers, financial records showing income far exceeding farming revenue, and personal notes documenting manufacturing techniques and production optimization. The owner maintained detailed records of his operations, apparently tracking technical improvements and calculating profitability metrics. The documentation demonstrates systematic professional operations conducted over years with careful planning and quality control. The owner's arrest shocks the sparse rural community. Neighbors who viewed him as a fellow farmer expressed disbelief that illegal weapons manufacturing occurred on property they passed regularly. Some remember seeing lights in the barn during late hours, but assumed he worked odd schedules common in agriculture. Local agricultural cooperatives face uncomfortable questions about whether they should have noticed indicators that his farming operations were minimal compared to his apparent income and property improvements. The revelation damages trust in a community where isolation creates dependence on neighbors' basic honesty. Media coverage emphasizes how rural isolation and agricultural operations provided perfect cover for illegal manufacturing. Stories focus on how the farm setting explained everything that might otherwise raise suspicions. The power consumption, the nighttime work, the substantial equipment, the shipping activity. The case generates discussion about whether rural properties create unique challenges for detecting illegal manufacturing compared to urban and suburban locations, where neighbors and regulations provide more oversight. The investigation expands to trace components through distribution networks extending across 5 states. Federal agents work with state and local police to identify all buyers who purchased from the owner, determining whether they used components for illegal weapons projects. Some buyers cooperate, admitting they purchased untraceable parts, knowing they came from illegal manufacturing. Others claim ignorance despite evidence suggesting they understood the components' illicit nature. The effort to trace all manufactured components becomes an extensive multi-state operation. Financial forensics document the full extent of illegal proceeds over 8 years. The owner generated approximately $5 million from component sales, money he laundered through the farm operation by reporting manufacturing revenue as agricultural income. He paid taxes on the false farming revenue to avoid IRS scrutiny, accepting the tax obligation to maintain his cover while hiding the manufacturing source of funds. Investigators trace investments in property improvements, equipment purchases, and various accounts, recovering assets traceable to illegal proceeds. Trial proceedings begin 9 months after arrest. The owner faces dozens of charges, including illegal firearms manufacturing, interstate trafficking, money laundering, fraud, and tax evasion spanning 8 years. Prosecutors present overwhelming evidence, including the seized manufacturing facility and equipment, recordings of undercover agents' transactions, forensic analysis linking his components to crime scene weapons, and financial records documenting years of unreported manufacturing income. Expert witnesses testify about firearms manufacturing regulations and explain why the owner's activities were clearly illegal despite his claims of legal uncertainties. The defense attempts to argue that manufacturing was legal because he produced unfinished components and that his rural location meant he reasonably believed zoning and licensing requirements didn't apply. These arguments fail against evidence showing he produced complete functional components, explicitly discussed illegal applications with buyers, and took extensive measures to conceal operations through strategic equipment placement and encrypted communications. The prosecution establishes that someone with military training and machining expertise clearly understood legal requirements and deliberately chose to violate them. Conviction comes after a 5-week trial. Jurors find the owner guilty on all counts, determining he knowingly operated a sophisticated illegal manufacturing facility, using his farm as cover. The conviction validates the investigation and provides accountability for 8 years of systematic manufacturing that put thousands of weapon components into criminal circulation. Sentencing occurs 6 weeks after conviction. Federal guidelines call for substantial prison time given the quantity of components manufactured, the professional quality and scale of operations, the duration of criminal activity, and the connection to violent crimes. Prosecutors argue for maximum sentences, emphasizing that the owner's military training and technical expertise made his betrayal particularly serious as he applied skills intended for national defense to criminal manufacturing operations. The judge sentences the owner to 30 years in federal prison. The sentence includes 22 years for manufacturing and trafficking charges, 6 years for money laundering, and 2 years for tax evasion and fraud, with terms running partially consecutively. The judge also orders forfeiture of the entire property, including all buildings and land, all manufacturing equipment, vehicles, and restitution totaling $1 million. The harsh sentence reflects the sophisticated nature of operations and the substantial harm caused by years of professional quality illegal manufacturing. Civil asset forfeiture proceedings seize the farm property, all equipment, and financial accounts. The total value exceeds $2 million. The property eventually sells to a legitimate farming operation that completely removes the metal barn and all associated equipment, returning the land to purely agricultural use. The new owners maintain no workshops or manufacturing capabilities, operating a conventional cattle and hay operation. The case prompts discussion in law enforcement about detecting illegal operations in rural settings where isolation and agricultural activities provide natural cover for suspicious indicators. Rural properties often have high power consumption, substantial equipment, and irregular work schedules that would raise questions in other settings but seem completely normal in agricultural contexts. Training programs develop to help investigators recognize patterns that might indicate hidden manufacturing despite legitimate agricultural covers. Agricultural equipment suppliers and power companies receive guidance about reporting patterns that might suggest equipment or electricity use inconsistent with claimed agricultural operations. The voluntary reporting programs aim to identify potential illegal manufacturing without creating burdens for legitimate farmers who often have legitimate reasons for unusual equipment or power consumption patterns. The goal is detecting criminal exploitation of agricultural settings without creating paranoia affecting honest rural residents. 3 years after the operation's dismantling, federal agents continue tracing components manufactured at the farm as they appear in investigations across the country. Some parts produced 8 years earlier are just now being recovered, having circulated through multiple owners before coming to law enforcement attention. Each recovery provides additional evidence of the operation's scope and sometimes leads to arrests of individuals who purchased or possessed the illegal components. For the rural community where the farm operated, the case creates lasting impacts on how neighbors view each other and their shared isolation. The revelation that systematic illegal manufacturing occurred for years without detection, despite the property's visibility from adjacent farms, damages the trust that rural communities rely upon. Some residents implement informal monitoring of neighbors' activities, while others resist such surveillance as contrary to rural values of independence and privacy. The community struggles to balance awareness of potential threats against desire to maintain traditional rural culture. 5 years after the case, the agricultural region continues operating normally, with thousands of legitimate farms conducting honest operations. The single case of illegal manufacturing exploitation is recognized as an anomaly rather than an indicator of widespread problems. Law enforcement maintains enhanced awareness of how rural settings might conceal illegal operations, while respecting that the vast majority of agricultural properties house only legitimate farming activities. The story concludes with recognition that rural isolation and agricultural operations can provide perfect cover for illegal manufacturing when criminals invest in creating convincing facades. The farm manufacturing case demonstrated how settings that explain high power consumption, substantial equipment, and irregular work schedules allow operations that would seem suspicious in other contexts. But once data analytics identified anomalies and investigators conducted patient surveillance, overwhelming evidence emerged, proving systematic illegal manufacturing hiding behind legitimate agricultural activities. Vigilance in monitoring equipment, purchases, and utility consumption, even in rural agricultural settings, remains essential for detecting illegal manufacturing operations. The owner succeeded for 8 years because his agricultural cover explained everything that might otherwise trigger investigation. Only comprehensive analysis across multiple data sources revealed patterns indicating probable illegal operations worth investigating despite the farming cover. The work of detecting manufacturing in rural settings never ends, requiring sustained attention to indicators that might suggest criminal exploitation of agricultural contexts, providing natural concealment for illegal activities.